Dopey Draculas. Or, at least, dopey vampires. They're a thing, and I have several of these to share with you, including one I really liked, so be sure to watch to the end. It's all coming up on this installment of Howl-O-Ween. Dopey Draculas. So, what's that all about? Well, these are vampire movies that are kinda dopey. Vampires that just don't cut the mustard. Some are okay, but most are mostly middling. They aren't up there with Lugosi or Lee, and that's a fact. But, as I say, I did find at least one that was very different, so stay tuned for that. First up, in our deep dive of Dopey Draculas, we have The Vampire Happening from 1971, a ribald vampire comedy. Now, in the vernacular of the time, happening was slang for an event. It could be a party or a concert or whatever. Something was going on, and it was a happening. In this one, a popular American actress inherits a spooky old castle in Europe. Little does she know it has a vampiress, which she stupidly frees from her coffin. The vampiress just happens to look exactly like her. It helps that the two characters were played by the same actress. Turns out the vampiress is a distant relative. Anyway, a lot of fun is had when the two unknowingly switch places off and on throughout the movie. It all winds up at a big vampire party. Happening. Both the vampiress and the actress are in attendance, as well as the actress's servant and her new boyfriend. And they have to figure out how to survive and nobble these vampires. The guest of honor, of course, is Dracula himself, and he's a dopey Dracula for sure, arriving in a tricked-out helicopter and everything. With all of these sexy girls running around topless, Dracula rises. So would I, if you know what I mean. This one is a bit thin, but it's kind of fun in the vein of the Carry On films. Not quite as polished and with the girls actually flashing the goods. And then there's Rockula, a comedy from 1990. In this one, Dean Cameron plays a vampire who suffers two curses, one being a vampire, and the other is that he can never lose his virginity. Why? Because centuries ago his chick was killed by pirates before he could do the deed. Now this chick keeps getting reincarnated every 22 years with no memory of her past lives, and every time our hero tries to reunite with her, she dies. Well, this time he wants it to be different, and he's determined to save her and have makeouts. This time around, she's a hot rock and roll musician, and in order to impress the chick, he starts his own band and becomes Rockula, a rockin' vampire. Can Rockula save the chick of his dreams and end his curse? This came from Canon Pictures, and being from 1990, it's kind of an 80s holdover, so the music and fashions are fun. And the vampire heroes are not threatening in any way, and it's all played for laughs. Aside from Cameron, Thomas Dolby is here as the chick's manager and overall villain of the piece, and Bo Diddley appears, and he joins Rockula's band, so that's a hoot. And Tony Basil steals the show as Rockula's vivacious mom. I really liked her. Cameron, as a vampire, is pretty dopey. But it's an 80s comedy, so it's enjoyable in that retro way. And his chick is smoking hot. He's still dopey, though. Okay, how about this one? From 1966, we have Track of the Vampire, also known as Bloodbath, produced by Roger Corman. Now, in this one, the vampire isn't really a vampire. He just sort of thinks he is. He's a dopey artist who kills chicks and boils them in a vat. Ugh. This stars William Campbell, Trelane from Star Trek. It also has my favorite chick from Petticoat Junction, Laurie Saunders. You'll also spot Sandra Knight and Sid Haig. Some of the footage here was clipped out of another movie with William Campbell in it, a Yugoslavian crime thriller called Portrait of Terror. So this guy isn't really a vampire, just a wannabe, bog-standard, crazy killer guy. He does seem to grow fangs when thinking he's a vampire, so there's that. Mostly he just chops people up, though. Talking about vampires who aren't really one, we have Condemned to Live from 1935. Here we see that a doctor, his wife, and a professor are on an expedition and have somehow offended the natives. The wife is due to give birth, and the explorers are hiding, taking shelter in a cave which the natives fear. That's because this cave is full of bats. Vampire bats. Before she gives birth, one of these bats bites her. And now her kid is condemned to live, with the possibility of becoming a batty brat biting babes. They apparently escape and go back home. Flash forward years later, and the kid has become a respected figure in town. Nothing has happened for years, but due to his tireless and exhausting work for the townspeople, eventually his battiness bubbles up, and he starts having spells and going around killing townsfolk vampire style. This one is okay for its time. It isn't quite on a par with the Universal horror pictures, but it has some atmosphere. Misha Auer plays a hunchback who works for the poor guy who goes batty. Is the guy really a vampire? Well, it doesn't look it. He just sort of bites people when he has a spell and goes loony. And he doesn't seem to realize he's the killer. You do feel bad for him in the end, and the bat that bit his mom probably had nothing to do with it. But wait, there's more! How about Billy the Kid versus Dracula from 1966? In this one, a vampire is way out west, so you have a mashup of two genres going on, horror movies and westerns. Here, a vampire going by the name of Mr. Underhill, who's not a hobbit, is on the stagecoach and meets this old biddy. She shows him a locket with a picture of her cute niece, and this gets Drac's attention. Can't blame him there. This vampire kills an Indian chick, so the Indians go on the warpath and wipe out all the people on the stage. Now, Mr. Underhill poses as the girl's uncle, so he can get close and put the bite on her. Again, can't blame the guy there. But as fate would have it, her boyfriend is none other than Billy the Kid. This Western anti-hero is decidedly cast as a good guy in this picture. As the vampire starts chomping his way around town, Billy has got to protect his chick and winds up in a shootout with the vampire. Who wins? Well, who do you think? I'll give the movie this. It's an interesting concept, and we have John Carradine as the vampire, so that's a big win in my book. Chuck Courtney plays Billy, and not surprisingly, he was in a lot of westerns in his career. William Bodine directed, and he was a veritable legend, directing as many as 300 B movies over his long-running career. Well, this leads us to our last entry, the really good picture, which I promised you. This is also a western, and is possibly the first western vampire mashup. I'm talking about Curse of the Undead from 1959. This is a very atmospheric western, and the vampire's kind of creepy too. In this one, People in town, especially the ladies, are getting chomped on. People think it's some kind of illness, but those in the know soon realize it's a vampire. This creepy gunman is hanging around, and sure enough, he's the killer, in more ways than one. He's a gun for hire, and even when people beat him to the draw, they die and he doesn't. The new preacher in town is making time with a cute chick, and she's on the menu. Our accursed cowpoke has the hots for her and wants to make her his ghoulish gal. Can the preacher save her and put an end to the vampire's red blood-rustling rampage? I loved this one. Again, very atmospheric and very different. The vampire is not depicted in quite the usual way. Western stalwart Michael Pate plays the vampire. Bruce Gordon plays a greedy ranch owner. He was Frank Nitti on The Untouchables. And Eric Fleming from The Queen of Outer Space. He plays the preacher. Probably the most familiar face here is the town doctor, played by longtime character actor John Hoyt, who played another doctor on a more famous project, Dr. Boyce in the original pilot of Star Trek. I can't recommend this one enough. It's unusual and well worth a watch. So, there you have it, some Dopey Draculas. I'll be back with another video soon as Howl-O-Ween continues.